Hey everyone, thank you for stopping by my channel today. My name is Kim and I'm here with Bandit, who's sitting on my lap. I just celebrated my 37th Japaniversary. I came to Japan on July 31st, 1988. God, I had to think about that for a while. Someone in my comments recently made a suggestion, which I thought, wow, it's a really good suggestion, about the differences or maybe the challenges about city life versus country life in Japan. I thought this would be a good topic because I know some of you are coming right now on the JET program and maybe you're dealing with a placement that you didn't expect, or maybe you requested city life and you got country life, or vice versa. Or maybe you're someone that's contemplating moving and living in Japan and you're not sure yet what area you want to settle down in or look for jobs in. So this time, I made a whole set of notes to try to refer to because it is a pretty big topic and there are so many pros and cons for each. And I feel like a big part of your happiness here depends on your own personality. For example, what types of things stress you out? How much experience have you had living abroad? What is your comfort zone level? Are you basically an introvert, an extrovert? Are you someone that needs a big social circle, or are you someone that is content being by yourself? With all those things to consider, you might not have control over where you get placed. So when I talk about my city versus country challenges, I'm going to try and give you just different insights about both. I don't want to necessarily say one is better than the other, but I will give you an opinion about how I would rate this or what I would use to base my judgment on. And hopefully this can help some of you that are maybe contemplating or wondering about these areas. All right, let's get started. Now, to give you a little background about my particular background, I lived in Los Angeles pretty much all my life. Los Angeles is a big city. We lived in the suburbs in East Los Angeles. So I was used to city life. I went to a big university in Southern California. So I'm very comfortable in the city. You can check out my video that I made about why I applied for the JET program and why I came to Japan, because it really has nothing to do with reasons that maybe most of you have probably considered for coming to Japan, but it is a story in its own. I requested Kyoto because I literally knew nothing about Japan. And I thought, oh, everybody's going to request Tokyo. And I thought, oh, Kyoto is a nice blend of culture, what my image was of old Japan, because mind you, I had never been to Japan. My parents went on their 25th anniversary. In my head, I had an idea of what Japan was like, and I always wanted to go, but I never thought I would work and live here, let me tell you that. Anyways, I was assigned, or I got my JET placement to Tottori Prefecture. And the first thing, of course, what we all do is you look up and try and get as much information as you can about the area you're assigned to. And we didn't have internet. We didn't have any form of getting information except from what our predecessors or what people in that area. Man, do you want to come sit up here? Hold on. All right. We didn't have any information, and most of the information that I could get were from travel books. And all that the book said was that Tottori was the most densely populated prefecture, and it was very rural, and they were right. I had a lot of confidence going in with teaching or with the actual job itself, so I wasn't worried about that. I am pretty much a loner, so I wasn't worried about having to make friends or make a social group. I was pretty much ready for anything. So it didn't really faze me, or I didn't think too strongly about being placed in a rural area as opposed to a city area. Now, Totori is very rural. And if you can imagine country life, and I mean country life, without any of the comforts or without any of the familiarities, can't say that word, without any of the familiar places that you have from home, then that's a big adjustment. So, what I'm kind of basing a lot of my experiences on are back in 1988 when we didn't have the internet. We didn't have social media. We didn't have a lot of the things that you all have now. So, in one sense, I feel like I've experienced probably a lot more harder lifestyle than some of you that are coming. That being said, everybody, no matter what age you are, when you go to a foreign country and you're actually going to be living there and working there, it's an adjustment. Nothing to be embarrassed about, nothing to be ashamed of if you have those moments where you break down, cry, melt down, whatever. All right. First, let's talk about the cost of living, which, of course, is a pretty big factor in how you're going to maintain your lifestyle, what you're going to be able to do in Japan. I don't know what it was like back in 1988, price-wise, for people that were assigned to big city areas, but in Totori, I was pretty lucky because my rent was 10,000 yen per month. I lived in something called the Kyoshoku Jutaku, which is housing that is government related, so government related housing. It was what they refer to as a 3 LDK, which means I had 3 rooms. I had a small kitchen. I had a little bathroom, which was separate from the toilet area. I had a little backyard, a fenced backyard with a huge loquat tree and a lot of weeds and a lot of bugs. My bottom room was a tatami mat room, and I had a very narrow and steep staircase. Upstairs, I had 2 rooms that was, so maybe, I guess it would be considered maybe a 2 LDK. I'm not sure. Anyways, I had 2 rooms, neither of which were flooring. I think they were both tatami rooms. No furniture. I did have the beautiful sliding paper doors. No air conditioning, no hot running water. No hot running water, no fan. The bathtub was just a gigantic ceramic structure that I would load with water, and then I had to crank up a gas heater to heat the water in the bath. I mean, basically, 10,000 yen, you can't really complain, because back then it was probably equivalent to about $100 a month. The other thing, too, was in my head, I thought, okay, I expected this. I expected to come out of my comfort zone, I expected to have to come out of my comfort zone, so I wasn't going to complain. I was going to embrace this new life that I had in the country. I think the biggest expense for me was having to purchase a landline for my telephone. I'm not sure on the exact cost, but if I recall, it was around 70,000 yen, or $700 roughly, to get a telephone line. We also had to pay for international lines as well as just the local landlines. It was a lot. It was a lot. Because I was in a complex that had 4 different units. I think I shared the water bill with my neighbor, and when the bill came, we just divided it up. So essentially, the jet salary was very easy to live on because my cost of living was easy. I didn't have a car, so I didn't have to pay for any car expenses, gasoline, parking. I lived a pretty simple lifestyle, but I think that's probably what most people will probably be doing for the first year anyways, because in your mind, you're probably thinking that your life in Japan is only going to be temporary, which is the way my mindset was. I didn't expect to spend much on furniture or appliances, even though I did have to pretty much start from scratch. Because I was living in a rural area, I kind of thought that things were not to my standards as far as cleanliness went. But once again, if I look back on it, I did come from a pretty privileged lifestyle to be able to have a lot of nice appliances. I had gas burners, but I only had 1 burner. And back home, I had 4. So it was really, I kept thinking in my head, I'm not going to complain because this is my Japan journey. The bath, I was used to taking a bath with running hot water, and all of a sudden now I have to heat up this bathtub. It's like heating water on the stove to take your bath in. The clothes washing machine was just something that swished clothes around. There was no hot water. I couldn't do a load of laundry with hot water unless I used this long hose that you put in your heated water of the bathtub and connect it to your washing machine and then set it on something and do it that way. I had a lot of bugs. Slugs in the bathroom. What else? I had these metallic-y looking bugs. I think someone said they're June bugs. I don't know. I don't know my bug species. But because of that tree, I had a lot of cicadas or cicadas, however you say that, because I didn't grow up with them, and they make this loud buzzing noise. There were frogs in my backyard, just everything. But in my head, this is country life. So I wasn't going to complain, and I tried to embrace it as best I could. Let's fast forward to where I am now, and I guess I'm sure it was a lot different back in 1988, but I think there are still aspects of rural and country living that are similar to what I experienced. The only difference is that you do have now internet and ways to communicate with other people, whereas back then I pretty much didn't have anything except my landline phone and snail mail. The cost of living in the city is always going to be more expensive, even if you go to the country areas of the city, because I did live in the countryside of Osaka for 5 years. I lived in an area called Kawachi-Nagano, which was right close to Wakayama Prefecture. Beautiful area, but the benefit of that was living in the countryside, but just hopping on a train and going to the city areas at just 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Whereas in Tottori, you're really pretty much far away from anything remotely close to what it was like in Osaka and Tokyo. When you're in the city, a lot of times you have to pay for things like parking. If you get a car, you do have to show proof of a parking space, so it doesn't matter whether you're in the city or the country, you still have the same cost for your vehicles. But I think in the countryside, most shopping areas, most places that you go to don't charge for parking, whereas in the city areas, if you go someplace, you probably have to pay for parking. That includes your shopping centers, sometimes even your grocery stores. You can get your parking validated, but in the countryside, that's really not an issue. You still have to pay the same types of taxes, but your residential tax in rural areas is most likely going to be a lot cheaper than if you were living in the city areas. And these are mandatory taxes. A lot of times you have no idea because it's automatically taken out of your bills, or when you get paid, it'll get taken out of your bank account. So you really don't miss that money, but you do know that it's being taken out. One thing that really surprised me living here in Yokohama is that I have to pay something called forest tax. And I just found out about that actually this year. It's, I guess, in the city areas like Yokohama, they want to maintain the greenery or nature. So by paying this forest tax, I guess it goes to that. I'm not sure. So, yeah, so that was an additional chunk of money that was taken out or that I had to pay, which wasn't fun. And I didn't have that when I lived in Tottori. When you're living in the city, you probably don't need a car. You can get around totally by public transportation, such as the bus, subways, trains. There's so many different lines. So, yeah, so you're paying probably for your commuting fee when you're going from your home to your workplace. But most of the time that is covered by your school or your business. So it's not, you don't feel like you're paying that much. But if you're in the countryside, you still get your transportation taken care of by your school or by your company. But you may want to purchase a car to give you access to places more easily. So that could be an additional cost in your cost of living. Most everything else, I think, is about the same. You might have more back in the day when we actually needed TV antennas and TV stations and cables and all that stuff, that was an extra expense. But nowadays, gosh, you can just watch anything on your computer. So a lot of the things that I think we did for your cost of living, the luxury items, now they're just kind of standard now. So I think basically it's just your rent and your transportation fee. Whatever else you add on to that, that's your choice. Another thing about cost of living is your food. I feel like food is probably the same almost everywhere, but I will tell you that one of the benefits of living in the countryside is whatever that particular area specializes in will be cheap for you. I was super lucky because all the places I've lived in have fruit or seafood as their specialties. So living in Tottori, man, you get the best crab, you get the best oysters, you get the best 21st century pears, which are like the Japanese apple pears. You get grapes, watermelon. What else do they specialize in? Yeah, everything. Seafood was great. So food was never a problem. I felt for people that were saying, oh, food is so expensive in Tokyo. Now that I live in the city, it can be expensive, but it just depends on, I think, I don't know. I guess for me, fruit is a must-have. Vegetables are a must-have. So I don't mind paying for that. But yeah, I think your prices in your grocery stores are probably going to be about the same. But maybe there's some things that you can get more cheaply in country areas. I feel like in the city, maybe you have more chances or more opportunities to eat out or buy or go to restaurants that you're familiar with. Go to super nice restaurants, all the Michelin star ones. In Totori, we didn't have like we did have nice restaurants. We did have places that you can go to celebrate different occasions, but it wasn't, I guess, I don't want to use the word competitive, but I guess it just wasn't as big of a thing as maybe it is in Tokyo, where if you want to eat a dish at this particular chain restaurant, it's cheap, but if you really want to go to another place that has more Michelin stars or more a broader reputation, you have that. So maybe your money goes to spending meals a lot more on that. One of the things that I was so blessed with living in Totori was having neighbors that were farmers, because at your doorstep you get the pears, you get fruit, you get vegetables, homegrown stuff. The day of the crab auctions, you have people going out to get fresh crabs, and I love me a good crab leg. So, right, all of that is fresh and just so readily available. But maybe in the city areas, you've got to go to department stores or different places, and maybe you do have to pay a little bit more. So that's a consideration. What I will say is, once you go to your area, find out what their specialties are, because that could mean that you'll be blessed with having that food option available. When I lived in Shizuoka, it was mandarin oranges or tangerines, strawberries. In Shizuoka, wasabi and tea. So all the things I like. In Gunma, it was cabbage. Love cabbage. So to sum up, whether the cost of living, whether it's better to live in the country or the city, well, naturally everybody wants to save money, right? So naturally the cost of living is probably going to be better in the country areas. So if you're someone that wants to save up money, you probably can. That being said, other factors may interfere with living in the country, you know, so you could have a really cheap lifestyle, but you could be using more money to go travel to the city, if you know what I mean, or to buy items that you're missing. I do think the cost of living in the city is not as bad as sometimes people make it out to be. However, you will hear JET participants sometimes complain that, oh man, you're so lucky you can do this. I can't afford to do this. Or so yeah, it comes with its pros and cons, but I do think the cost of living in the countryside is cheaper. Now, let's go to number 2, accessibility, because that kind of plays into the cost of living.